So in the last section, we were introduced to exponential functions. I just want to talk about a few characteristics of the graph of an exponential function. You remember that this is the form, you have some base raised to the x power. So the very first thing you should know is this is a function. It does pass the vertical line test. And in this function, b is greater than 0. So this is not 0, it's also not 1, but it is anything else except those two numbers as long as it's greater than 0, so a positive number. It's 1 to 1, which means it passes the horizontal line test, and that also means that it has an inverse. The horizontal asymptote is y equals 0, so this is your horizontal asymptote. The domain is everything. It goes forever left and forever right. That means the domain is all real numbers. The range goes from 0 to infinity. It does not include 0, but it does go from 0 to infinity. It does not have an x-intercept because we have a horizontal asymptote there. Okay, no x-intercept. The y-intercept is always 0, 1. Notice on both of these graphs, it crosses the y-axis at 1. It is an increasing function if b is greater than 1. Remember these conditions. It has to be greater than 0, but it can't be 1. Well, if b is greater than 1, it's increasing. So if it's 1.2, or if it's 3.8, or if it's 120, whatever, as long as b is greater than 1, this b right here, this is an increasing function. It is decreasing if b is less than 1. Now this one is interesting because it says b is less than 1. Well, -6 is less than 1, right? Well, look here. It says b has to be greater than 0. So that means that 0 is less than b, which is less than 1. So b is actually between 0 and 1, which means b is some sort of fraction or a decimal, right? So if b is some sort of fraction or a decimal, we're going to have a decreasing function. Looks like this one. This is your exponential growth function. This is your exponential decay function. Sketch a graph of this function, state the domain, range, and asymptote. Well, let's just pick some values to put into our table. And let's pick some positive and some negative values. Keep in mind we need to make sure that b is greater than 0 and it's not equal to 1. So it matches those requirements. We're definitely going to be using our calculator for these because we just need values to sketch on our graph. So let's pick something like -3, -2, -1, 0, 1, 2, 3. So if we plug a -3 in here, we're going to have 0.25 to the -3 power. And that would be 64. That's not going to fit on my graph. So we have 0.25 to the -2 power is going to be 16. 0.25 to the -1. 0.25 to the 0 power. Remember, anything to the 0 power is 1. But if you don't remember, you can just plug it in and you'll see that it is 1. 0.25 to the first power, we should know that that's just 0.25, right? Just in case you didn't know. We all believe our calculators, right? 0.25 squared is going to be 0.06. Remember, I just need points I can plot on the grid, so I'm rounding them to 2 decimal places. And this one will be 0.02. So -3 is all the way up at a 64 somewhere. -2 is all the way up at a 16. -1 is up at 4. Then we have 0, 1, 1.25, And then it looks like it just gets closer and closer and closer to the x-axis. So this graph looks something like that. What is the domain? Sorry, what's the domain of this function? Goes forever left and forever right. The domain is everything. The range goes from 0 to infinity, but does not include 0. The asymptote is the x-axis, which is the equation y equals 0.